Critwalker, somewhere outside of Nashville, Tennessee. This is the award-winning podcast, ParaReality.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for listening tonight. My name is Sandman, and I'll be your guide through this strange realm of ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, conspiracy theories, and other unsolved mysteries that I like to call ParaReality. Well, tonight's episode is going to take a dark turn. It's going to be a dark one. I haven't tackled a dark topic in a long time, and when I was trying to think up of something to cover for tonight's episode of the podcast, I started looking through some of my old show notes, and I ran across a list of possible topics that I had made up a few years ago. And I began to look through this list, and I ran across what eventually became the topic for tonight. Do you believe that human beings have a soul or some sort of consciousness that survives even after our physical body dies? Well, I do. And I also believe that while our consciousness dwells within our physical bodies, it can be attacked by invisible entities that either want to do it harm or harm our physical bodies in some way, or even both. Do you sometimes wonder why people have inexplicable outbursts of rage, uncontrolled fear, or eruptions of other negative emotions which sometimes lead to horrifying situations and even crime? Are the childhood traumas and the existence of various negative psychological aspects within a personality the only explanation for such phenomena? Well, in my opinion, they're not. There are many indications of various conscious entities that are attached to us directly or indirectly affecting our behavior and our state of consciousness. There's a vast range of beings and energies that can be nested in our aura or within our being, such as souls or energy remnants of deceased people, parts of personalities of living persons, or even the classical beings of darkness, i.e. demons. What is most interesting, though, is that some people believe that the attached beings aren't originating from this planet at all, that they're extraterrestrial in nature. And I don't happen to be one of those people who subscribe to that. But anyway, there are way too many entities to talk about in an only 1 hour long podcast. So tonight I'll tackle 5 invisible entities that can cause us harm. And to learn more, you'll have to tune in, and find out. But first, it is email time, one of my favorite parts of the podcast. This comes from, and this is a guy in Egypt. You guys know how I slaughter names, and this one is going to be no exception. I am so sorry on the front end for how I'm going to slaughter your name. It's Kerbrose from Egypt, and he is getting in touch with me via YouTube on my YouTube channel, ParaReality 1, there on YouTube. And I say this a lot, believe it or not, I do have a lot of people who actually listen to the podcast via YouTube, because all of my audio from the podcast are loaded up to YouTube. So I have a lot of people who the only way they get it is through YouTube. So he writes, and this is regarding the Global Hum, which is the first in my summer series on mysterious and unexplained noises. And he writes, I live in Egypt, and I got the same syndrome. I think that's because I'm in tech, and I know how my lovely country infects computers, and I speak about it to people. I said Global Hum. This is actually, he's talking about the Havana syndrome, not Global Hum. So, speaking of Havana syndrome, so he thinks he lives in Egypt, and he thinks he has Havana syndrome. So Okay, Kerbase, thank you, first of all, very much for your comment. And what I'd like to know from you are several things. Number one, when did your symptoms begin? Number two, what are your symptoms in the first place? Number three, you say that you work in the tech industry. Do you think that a foreign government is doing this to you because of your career? Or do you think it could be some sort of competitor or something like that? Fourth question I have for you, sir. Are any other workers in your office being affected similarly? Which leads to question number 5. If they are, what are their symptoms? And the sixth and final question I've got for you, I know it's a lot of questions. If they're not being affected, if your coworkers are not being affected, why do you think that you are the only one being affected? So if you find yourself, Kerbase, listening to this episode of the podcast, please send me an email with your answers. I'm very interested in finding out what they are. I give my email address out several times throughout the podcast, but I'll go ahead and do that now. Sandman@ParaReality.com, Sandman@ParaReality.com, or you just get back in touch with me through YouTube and just leave a comment on YouTube, just kind of like what you did this first time to get in touch with me. So thank you very much for your email, and I'm very interested to learn the answers to all of those questions that I had, and I certainly hope that you get back in touch with me as soon as you possibly can. So now that I've answered that email or addressed that situation, take a listen to this. ParaReality is a proud member of the Straight Up Strange podcast network. To learn more about all the awesome podcasts that are members of the Straight Up Strange family, go to straightupstrange.com and get strange. Hey, how would you like to be an agent of chaos? What is chaos? It's the knowledgeable apprentices of Sandman, and that's what I call my Patreon account members. I'm looking for new agents, and I'd love it if you'd sign up to become one. There are 3 levels of agents, and all are extremely affordable, $5 a month or less. Each level offers exclusive content, along with the ability to help create podcast episodes, and even the chance to be a guest or a co-host. To learn more, head on over to patreon.com/ParaReality. 100% of the proceeds from Patreon goes back into producing quality content for this podcast. You are listening to the ParaReality podcast, your information source for conspiracy theories, UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. New episodes drop the first Friday of every month at 8 o'clock p.m. Central U.S. time. Listen on your favorite podcast station. Turn on, tune in, and find out.
If you wish to change, you must first lift the veil of ignorance that has been cast over your eyes. Only then will you see the true power of the universe.
All right, guys. Here are my 5 invisible entities that can cause us harm. But before we get into it, there's an increasingly important question in science, and that is human consciousness, which is a complete mystery. Does it exist? Does it go on in some way after we die? Some research say that consciousness survives the death of the physical body and goes somewhere. And if this is true, is it possible that our consciousness, after physical death, transitions to one of the parallel universes that string theory is talking about? Or maybe dark matter and dark energy answer that question of the spiritual world's existence, which may be made up of subtle and invisible particles and fields of these unknown types of matter and energy. In any case, even the most stubborn of skeptics cannot refuse these possibilities. Personally, I have always described myself as an open-minded skeptic, and I have, after all of my years of doing this podcast and doing research and everything that I have done, I have come to the definitive conclusion that consciousness does survive the death of the physical body. And I also believe that consciousness is immortal, and that the world beyond what we know it here on this earthly plane does, in fact, exist. So, if consciousness is immortal and omnipresent, the question that we've got to ask ourselves is, are there other dimensions, parallel universes, and other levels of reality? So we have to admit that there's a logical possibility that alongside this world, there also exist an innumerable conscious beings of various kinds which are present in these worlds. And also, this material universe that we're in right now is probably inhabited by many types of conscious entities, not only humans and other beings from this planet, but species on other planets and other solar systems and different cosmic environments. Therefore, countless beings must exist that are invisible to us. And these beings live in the physical world as well as all of those other levels of existence above this one in which we occupy. Of course, there are entire groups and hierarchies of these invisible beings, at least as some people believe that. So logically, for some types of entities, we could say that they are neutral from our perspective. Some of these entities are good, others are bad, while the others, they're so strange that we can't classify them into any one group or even comprehend what these things are with our minds. Of course, the idea of invisible entities that are present here alongside us or even with us is kind of out there. Some people may say it's very disturbing, but this is only partially true. Yes, there are beings that we cannot see, hear, or we don't even feel their presence in any way. Yet many of these beings are able to see us and even have impacts on our lives to some extent. Some of these invisible beings are, like I said, neutral. Some are bad or unpleasant, but we need to know that there are many positive beings that help us and inspire us on our life's journey. And from what I have read, a lot of people call them light beings or beings of light. And although all this can kind of be disturbing to someone who faces these ideas for the first time, who's first hearing this, we need to know that all is up to us. Ultimately, we are in charge, and every person is fundamentally responsible for their own life, because all of these positive or negative influence from these entities are only the result of our deepest inner decisions, thoughts, habits, or emotional turmoil. So do you sometimes find yourself wondering why people have these inexplicable outbursts of rage, uncontrolled fear, or eruptions of other negative emotions, which sometimes lead to, bad things happening and crime? Are the childhood traumas and the existence of various negative psychological aspects within a personality the only explanation for these phenomena? Well, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, at the very top, in my opinion, they're not. There are many indications of various conscious entities that are attached to us directly or indirectly, affecting our behavior and our state of consciousness. A lot of literature describes research in this field. William J. Baldwin, who wrote the book Healing Lost Souls, he depicts many cases of solving psychic problems and dysfunctional relationships by applying specific techniques for the release of so-called attached entities. Now, there's a vast range of beings and energies that can be nested in our aura or within our being, such as souls or energy remnants of deceased people, parts of personalities of living people, or even the classical beings of darkness, i.e. demons. What's most interesting here is that some people believe that the attached beings aren't originating from this planet at all, that they are extraterrestrial beings. Now, I don't happen to be one to subscribe to that, but there are many, many people out there who think that extraterrestrial beings are somehow affecting our consciousness or interfering with our soul in some shape, form, or fashion. Like I said, I'm not one of those people who believes that. So what are some symptoms of these attachments that you can have from these unwanted, invisible beings? Well, it's not so easy to recognize that you have an attached entity to you, first of all, but you can be pretty certain that this phenomena is occurring to you or someone else if you identify these following symptoms. Number 1, a sudden change in behavior and habits. Number 2, sudden occurrence of some kind of addiction, like cigarettes, alcohol, or illegal drugs, something of that nature. Number 3, the onset of depression, suicidal ideations, panic attacks, or anger. Number 4, abrupt changes in body weight, like you suddenly lose a ton of weight, or even maybe gain, but more than likely is going to be lose a lot of body weight. Number 5, unexpected and unexplained physical or mental illnesses. And finally, number six, strange thoughts and feelings. Sometimes the appearance or you can hear inner voices, or you have nightmares, etc., stuff like that. However, for all of this, you need to be cautious and don't make any type of premature conclusion here. You certainly need to work on yourself first before going straight to, I've got something attached to me here. And you may have one or more of these symptoms, but just because you have one of these symptoms doesn't mean you've got a being attached to you, i.e. all of a sudden you have a sudden change in your behavior and you're angry all the time. Well, maybe you're just not getting enough sleep. Or maybe you have dropped 20 pounds in a month. Well, that doesn't necessarily denote that you have an entity attached to you. You could legitimately be sick. You could have something wrong with you. So you need to first work on yourself to try to figure out what it is something that I'm doing or lack of something that I'm not doing. Is that causing these symptoms? You should go to see a medical professional and see if there's some sort of medical explanation to what's going on. You don't automatically just say, oh, well, I'm angry all the time, I've lost a bunch of weight, and I'm hearing voices telling me to kill myself, so I must be, attached by some sort of unseen evil entity. No, I am not saying that. I'm just saying that what those things that I laid out for you, those 6 symptoms, signs and symptoms, that's what could be going on, not that that's what it is. So I always recommend, before you do anything and jump that gun saying, oh, this is all paranormal in nature, cool your jets, go see your doctor first. See if you can get a medical explanation. Okay? So I said there were going to be 5 types of entities that want to cause us harm, these invisible entities. And I'm about to go over those now. So there are 5 types of demon spirits, dark entities, stuff like that, that can cause you physical, spiritual, emotional harm, psychological damage. So the first one, now you may have heard of some of these, I'm sure you have, and one or two of them you may not have. I don't know. And like I said, there are a lot of them, way too many for me to go into a 1 hour long podcast on. So I just chose five that I found the most interesting. So number 1, souls of the dead. One type of the attached entities are the souls of dead people who, for whatever reason, remain tied with this physical world. Now, the term soul here denotes the nucleus of an individual, which is practically immortal, had existed before and will exist after the individual's incarnation. So in this sense, the nucleus has normally retained almost the whole personality of the deceased person. So the term soul of the dead in this case actually means the nucleus plus its personality. The souls stay at the physical level, typically due to strong attachments to a person or a place, due to complete disorientation and lack of awareness that it's no longer among the living, or could be for some various other reasons, but that first one is the most common. Nevertheless, all these souls eventually find the way to the higher levels of reality, most often with the help and guidance of those beings of light that I mentioned earlier. Now, although the number of souls of deceased people who remain at this physical plane, this earthly plane that we're on, is relatively small compared to those who find their way to the other levels, it still seems that there are plenty of them. Now, for example, many such souls that float around sites of mass executions, natural disasters, and other places of things like sudden and unexpected deaths, because they're still confused. They're in total confusion, unaware that they're even dead. They might not even know it. And these souls sometimes tend to be near people to whom they had used to be very emotionally tied to in life. In some cases, such a soul joins the person to whom it was bound simply by entering into that person's energy field or joining the aura of that person. This process is often unconscious because these souls are mostly in a dull, semi-conscious state. However, this doesn't prevent them from exerting influences on the behavior of the, for lack of a better word here, victim from the very moment of attaching. Now, unfortunately, this influence is usually harmful because those of us that have the entities or beings attached to them, we unconsciously try to fulfill some of that being's selfish desires and goals, despite us having our free will, because it's been taken away from us, I guess would be another. We don't have that. We don't have that free will. Not completely. We still retain some of our free. It's like a 50-50 split. So if that entity is attaching itself to you and it wasn't a good entity, just because someone was bad in life doesn't mean that when they die, they're automatically going to become good, right? No, most of the time, your soul, it retains whatever you were when you were alive. So if you were a bad person in life, you're going to be a bad person in death, right? So if you're the soul that is attached to you, or the energy or the entity that is attached to you is a bad entity, then and it's sharing your host body with you, you're gonna, this free will that you've got is no longer really free, right? You've got 50%, and the other 50% is struggling, right? So you may have some odd behaviors. Going back to those signs and symptoms that I was talking about earlier, you may not be acting yourself. You may not be sleeping well because the evil entity doesn't want to sleep right now. I want to get up and I want to go. So those are the kind of harmful things that can happen. And it can cause you to do and say things that you wouldn't normally do. Like, for instance, what if that person in life was addicted to heroin and you've never even smoked a cigarette in your whole entire life, but all of a sudden you have this uncontrollable urge that I need me some heroin. That's how it can damage us. If it was an alcoholic, same thing. You may be a teetotaler like me. That's what I'm doing right now, drinking some delicious tea. And the entity was an alcoholic, and it's saying, hey, I need to get me some alcohol. Or maybe it's saying, hey, we need some cash so I can buy these drugs and alcohol. So let's go rob the local 7-Eleven. You know? So you have to, those are ways that the souls of the deceased or the souls of the dead can harm us. The second thing are demons and the dark energy beings, are dark forces as a collective catch-all term. Now, the dark forces are an elite group of dark and lower level entities, an intelligence and consciousness form and a realm of existence. The dark forces consist of things like demons, dark energy beings, and dark spirit entities. And it seems that demons are the really big topic in paranormal investigating at the present time, and really they have been for several years, and I believe that is thanks to popular TV ghost hunting shows like Ghost Adventures and Zach Bagans running around. If you've noticed the last several years, Zach Bagans has everything that he goes and investigates. It's a demon. And that has influenced everybody in paranormal investigating. And now demons are the hot button thing in paranormal investigating. Demons are now seen as the primary cause for most hauntings, but this isn't true. While demons do exist, they're not everywhere, and they're not the cause of almost every haunted structure on the face of the planet. Now, I don't know that Zach. First of all, I love Zach Bagans. I love ghost hunters. No, he would kill me if he heard me say that. I love Ghost Adventures. I love Zach Bagans. I apologize for offending you, Zach. But I do. I really admire him because I do believe he is very passionate about what it is that he's doing. And he wants to educate people about what's happening. I just think that he is a little overzealous in his assumption that everything is a demon, and I don't know where this came from. It's just like come up out of the blue. And he has, this TV show has a large following. He is a big presence, and that is going to influence other people, right? People want to become a paranormal investigator because of Zach Bagans. You know, they see him on this show, and they see the other guys with him, Aaron Goodwin, Billy Tolley, and they want to be like those guys. Or you have, Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson from Ghost Hunters. You know, people admire them. They look up to them. They have a big following. People want to be like them, you know. And when you're that big of a celebrity, you really have to watch what you say and do when it comes to your influence. Now, I don't think that just because you're a celebrity that automatically makes you a role model, because it certainly doesn't. If you're going to be a role model, you need to physically take on that moniker. People, us civilians, us normal people, just automatically assume, well, you know, Joe Blow is a celebrity, and he's the biggest rock and roll singer on the planet right now, so he is my role model. Maybe he's not your role model. If he hasn't come on some television show or made some sort of press release that says, hey, I want to be a role model for young kids, then he's not your damn role model. We shouldn't put that moniker on people unless they specifically take it on themselves. Don't hang that mantle on me. Don't put that title on me. I am not your damn role model. If I wanted to be your role model, I would tell you I want to be your role model. You know? But anyway, so unfortunately, when you have this platform that he does with this big following and he's on TV, there's a lot of people that do look up to him and do consider him to be a role model. So he needs to be, unfortunately, cognizant of this and realize that not everything is a demon. They're not the cause of everything that's haunted. However, they are one of the major adversaries in the game of entity attachment and possession. Demons are non-human dark energy beings who attach to the living and create as much pain, misery, and chaos as they can. Their work here on this earthly plane is to empower the dark forces through things like manipulation, disempowerment, and destruction of the human race. They're made of either masses of dark souls that have been compressed together or whole non-human dark beings. And there are also different classes or species of demons like shapeshifters, and I'm not going to go into all those because I'm not a demonologist. So dark energy beings are, in fact, entities which are largely oriented to fulfilling their own selfish desires and aspirations, and therefore are confined within strong ego structures, defense mechanisms, and fear. Dark energy beings work hand in hand with the rest of the dark forces. They are, in essence, dark souls who became aligned with the dark forces after their physical death. They work together with demons and other dark entities to steal parts of people's power, steal parts of their souls, and create bigger openings and holes in people's energy field so they can pick up more entity attachments. On the other hand, some demons are born into human incarnation. Some people, at the time of their birth, are born with a demon or some other dark force entity attached to them or infused with their soul. And the demons become attached within the womb and at the exact moment of a new soul's arrival on this earthly plane. Now, this isn't a common phenomenon, and it only happens with people who have had contracts with the dark forces or unhealed, unfinished, uncleared soul contracts from a past life, or some other underlying issue that would cause a dark force to attach at that moment to a person's life. So, dark energy beings and demons all work to try to bring you down. They'll do anything that they can to bring you down while fulfilling their own ego structure. Now, third thing you might not know about are negative spirit guides. Everyone's heard of spirit guides, I'm sure, especially if you're listening to this podcast, but some spirit guides are positive, some can be negative. You don't really hear too much about the negative spirit guides because everybody thinks, well, a spirit guide, this is a positive thing. This is supposed to help me on my life's journey, right? Well, there are negative spirit guides. A negative spirit guide is a being who tries to hide under the guise of, well, a good spirit guide, but really has nothing positive to offer and is more than likely a dark spirit masquerading as your spirit guide or an angelic voice within a person. Now, we can have negative guides if we're in a negative period of our lives when we're going through something. I know that in a couple of times in my life, I have gone through some pretty bad negative things, and I believe that at least at one point in my life that I did have a negative energy spirit attached to me that was causing me to not be myself. And I was going through a negative period in my life. So this can be, the way you pick up these things can be through things like negative emotions, which is something that I was having. You can be doing drugs, or just being in a toxic environment, like being in an abusive relationship, or a relationship that's not good at all, whether it's physically or mentally abusive. Now, having negative spirit guides on your inner circle can create distractions from your life's path and can be a negative influence in your life. They may influence you to make choices that are out of alignment with your normal self. We live in a reality where duality is a law, and this means that we have both positive and negative energy available to us to create with. We get to choose what quality our thoughts, words, and deeds are, and this creates the quality of our vibration. It's the quality of our vibration that attracts the situations, the people, things, money, love, experiences, and opportunities in our life, as well as the quality of our spiritual guidance. So if you're in a negative space, you need to do whatever it is that you need to do to get out of that negative space, whether it's see somebody for counseling, talk to a friend, meditate, light some incense, do something to get yourself out of that negative headspace that you're in and get that negative spirit guide that could be there away from you, because the opposite of a negative spirit guide, or the opposite of negativity, is what? Positivity, right? So you want to be positive, and that's the way to get yourself out of that. Number 4 is something that you probably haven't heard of before. I know that I hadn't until I was doing research for this topic, and that's astral shells. Astral shells are human souls who, at the time of their death, just flat out refused to cross over to the next world. Now, they're different than the first category that I was talking about, the souls of the dead, because those souls may not realize that they have passed on. Astral shells do know that they have died, that their physical body has died, yet they are refusing to cross over to the next world. And because they didn't choose to cross over, they became stuck on this earthly plane as either whole souls or parts of souls, and this could possibly be forever for them. Now, these earthbound spirits, well, they're lost, they're lonely, and they're confused. And they're attracted to the living, and they draw the energy of the living from their emotions, from the emotions of the live person. They're like energy zombies, and they're instinctively trying to feed mostly on negative energy around them, since they themselves are largely composed of this kind of energy, namely the so-called negative emotions like pain, sorrow, fear, anger, rage. They are, so to speak, the heaviest forms of life energy that are naturally related to this densest level of existence, the physical reality. For this reason, these shells sometimes dissolve immediately along with the physical body, but in some cases they survive for a little while but decompose eventually. Until this process completes, they drift in the physical world and out of the physical world, most often in the vicinity of people or places to which the deceased were specifically linked. So the major difference between astral shells and the souls of the dead are the fact that the souls of the dead don't necessarily know that they're dead. Astral shells do know that they're dead. The first category of things that may cause us harm, those souls have either, let's just say, have had an unexpected or a sudden, swift and quick death, and they may not realize that their physical body is dead and they need to move on. However, the astral shells, they know that they've died, yet they just refuse to go. They're not going to the light. They're staying here on this earthly plane for whatever reason. That could be, I have unfinished business. I feel like I have unfinished business, or I'm too scared to go, or whatever. But they know that they're dead. or their physical bodies are dead, and they just don't want to cross over. So that leaves us with one final entity that can cause us harm, and these are pendulums. Now, there exists another type of entity that also has a significant impact on our state of consciousness and everyday behavior, so-called morphogenic fields or pendulums. Another name for this phenomena is from an old esoteric tradition is the egregors, or the egregores, however you want to say it. These are invisible, relatively defined energy entities that spontaneously arise and grow due to the law of mutual attraction between similar energies. When a number of people unite around a common idea or goal, their thoughts and emotions accumulate and eventually form an invisible energy entity that continues to exist and grow, feeding on similar energies, thoughts, and emotions from which it's made. Every state, church, association, corporation, sports club, family, and all other kind of clubs and social units have their own pendulums to support them and to strengthen them. Now, these energy fields are usually conscious or semi-conscious beings that try to provoke corresponding events around them by using invisible influence with the aim of generating the type of energy that suits them the best. These are often malevolent entities which cause things like wars, diseases, and suffering of all kind because they themselves are made up of the roughest forms of energy. These entities are not the beings of darkness, although the results of their influences are similar. Typically, their objectives coincide so much that they're operating in a kind of symbiosis, or at least working together, but they're not the same thing as the beings of darkness. Both on a collective and individual level, the pendulums are hooking on to people according to whether the injury of a particular person corresponds to that pendulum. In this way, the pendulum can directly affect the person's behavior, and it can also attract other negative entities of similar energies. One of the most common forms of pendulums, in my opinion, now, I am not the expert on pendulums, okay? And I am not a 100% expert on all these invisible entities that I'm talking about, okay? This is just me doing research and finding out things and passing this knowledge and information on to you. But in my personal and professional opinion, a really good example of a pendulum would be a tulpa. And if you don't know what a tulpa is, well, it's very similar to what the description of a pendulum is. It's a being that is brought into existence based upon the thoughts, feelings, emotions, stuff like that of a person. This tulpa feeds and grows on this energy and these thoughts and emotions from which it is made about. For example, perfect example of a tulpa, Slender Man. If you've never heard of Slender Man, then you need to look up Slender Man. I've done a whole episode on Slender Man. I need to do another one. But so Slender Man was considered to not be real as an internet invention on the Something Awful forums in a creepypasta. He was made up for a contest. And so many people thought this was real because this was the digital age, right? It's the 21st century. And there are millions of people who have access to the Something Awful forums. And all these people were reading this thing about Slender Man, and it was done very well. And even though it was a contest, it was a story, a made-up entity for a contest, people really thought that there was something to this. And so much so many people believed in Slender Man that supposedly they brought him to life because they believed so much in this entity that he was directly sprung to life thanks to all these millions of people out there who believed in him and gave that thing all of their energy for it to manifest itself. So that, to me, is a perfect example of a pendulum. So in conclusion here, modern physics is getting increasingly closer to the conclusion that parallel universes are real. I mean, just a few decades ago, this idea existed only in the domain of science fiction and just pure speculation. So it emerged unexpectedly as an outcome of several serious theoretical approaches. It's become very close to being wholly accepted among physicists. For example, string theory and the theory of inflation predict the existence of other universes. And also there's an increasing number of indirect experimental indicators that parallel universes do in fact exist. On the other hand, there's clear scientific evidence that this material universe that we're in is not only of gargantuan size, but that visible matter and known forms of energy are only a small part of total matter and energy present in the cosmos. Namely, in the standard lambda CDM model of cosmology, the total mass energy of the universe contains about 5% ordinary matter and energy, 27% so-called dark matter, and 68% of some mysterious thing known as dark energy. They don't know what to call it or what it really is, but here it is. It's dark energy. We're science, right? So in other words, only about 5% of the matter in the cosmos is visible and detectable, while the remaining 95% falls within these invisible forms of matter and energy. So here the word dark refers to being virtually invisible and unknown to us, at least at this time. So no one has an answer as to what dark matter and what dark energy are, but it's clear that they exist and that they permeate this reality in an invisible yet subtle way. Now, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, the existence of the human consciousness is an increasingly important question in science. Some studies show that consciousness survives the death of the physical body. So if this is true, then the possibility that our consciousness travels to one of those parallel universes after our physical body dies exists. That means that if our consciousness can travel somewhere else, then there are consciousnesses that are already out there, whether they were born from other people or they were already there, not from a human shell, that these things can cross over to our plane and cause us havoc as well. And even though I've got a lot of weird beliefs about a great many things, especially in what happens to us after we die, I'm still not convinced that there's a heaven for our souls to travel to. However, I do believe that our consciousness survives the death of the physical body, and I believe that our consciousness is immortal and exists everywhere. There is a world beyond what we know about here on this earthly plane. And just what exactly that world is or where it's located is something that I can't answer. But I know the only way to find out is to cross over. And right now, I'm in no hurry to do that. Well, that about does it for this episode of ParaReality. Thanks for listening. And before I close it out, I want you to listen to one more thing here.
Do you like being scared? Does the feeling of your throat tightening in fear, leaving you unable to scream, excite you? If the answer to these questions is yes, then you should listen to Scared to Death, Stories of Suspense, Science Fiction, and Horror. Scared to Death airs the third Friday of every month at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Tune in for the fright of your life.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Are you fed up with the way things are going in the world? Have you always wanted to say whatever was on your mind without having to listen to someone bitch about it or suffer any repercussions? Well, me too. That's why I created the Set It Off podcast. I'm sick and tired of the stupidity that's going on around here, and I'm going to let everybody know how I feel about it. So hop on board this train and fasten your seatbelt because I'm about to set it off. Set It Off can be heard on your favorite podcast station. New episodes drop on the fourth Friday of every month at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Time. You never know what I'm going to say next. Well, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode of ParaReality. If you want to leave a comment about it or anything else about the podcast, let me tell you how you can get in touch with me because there are more than one way. There is more than one way that you can do it. And man, there's several of them, so here they are. The best and easiest and quickest way to do it is to email me. That email address is sandman@parareality.com. That's sandman@parareality.com. Or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/sandman.parareality. That's facebook.com/sandman.parareality. You can post a message on my wall or send me a DM if you want to. There's all different kind of ways to leave me a message there on Facebook, and I don't have to tell you about all those. If you have a Twitter or an Instagram account, you can follow me on both of those platforms. My username is at ParaRealRadio on both Twitter and Instagram. That's at ParaRealRadio, Twitter and Instagram. And finally, you can always call the podcast here on the studio line at 615-692-1170 and leave me a message here on the studio line on the voicemail. That number to call once again is area code 615, then dial 692-1170. But I want you to remember this. If you do decide to leave me a message, you are giving me permission to play your comment on the podcast. So if you don't want that to happen, you'll need to let me know somewhere in your message. Now, I'm always looking for interesting stories for the podcast, so if you have a story that you'd like to get on the show, tell it to me over the voicemail. There's like a 3-minute time limit, so if you run out of time, call back and pick up where you left off. You don't have to tell me the whole entire story. You can just tell me enough, leave me some contact information so I can get back with you. Or maybe you don't even want to be a guest on the show. Maybe you just want to treat it like it's just like a call-in show, and you just want to tell me over the voicemail. That's fine, too. I want you to remember, though, if you don't want me to play back what you leave me, you need to let me know somewhere in your message. And by the way, if you do leave me contact information or last names, stuff like that, I do not play that over the air. I do not give out contact information on the podcast, and I do not give out last names, so you don't have to worry about that. So those are all the different ways you can contact me. Let me go over them again real quickly. Email sandman@parareality.com. Facebook at facebook.com/sandman.parareality. At ParaRealRadio on both Instagram and Twitter. Or finally, call the podcast on the studio line here in the secret bunker, 615-692-1170. And also, don't forget to visit my website. ParaReality.com is a place where you can keep up with all of the latest paranormal news from all around the world. I've got an entire page of the website devoted to paranormal news, and the content is updated just about daily. You can also shop in the ParaReality store, watch some terrible videos that I've made over the course of the years for the podcast, and listen to the podcast archives there. I got tons of audio on the website from the various incarnations of ParaReality over the years, and that's along with some of my other companion podcasts, which you just heard advertisements for here, Set It Off and Scared to Death. You can find all of that content for free on the archive section of the website. That's www.parareality.com, so make sure you check it out. Let's see, there's a Para News section you can click on and be taken to page, story after story of all kind of different paranormal news from all around the world. And also, please help support the show by shopping in the ParaReality swag store, where you can get all kinds of swanky merch to show your love for the podcast. ParaReality can be heard on your favorite podcast platform. Just search for ParaReality. And if you've got a smart speaker, you can listen there too. If you have any of the already mentioned podcast skills on your device, just say, hey, play the ParaReality podcast. I've also got that YouTube account, and you can listen to the podcast there too. It's also full of some great videos like UFO and paranormal documentaries. I did a short-lived news segment called News of the Strange. I think like 3 whole episodes of that. I got to try to do something with that. And it's also got some of those terrible show videos I did on my very short-lived web TV series that sucked balls. But hey, I put it up there for your entertainment. So to find the channel, just go to youtube.com/user/ParaReality1. That's the number 1. So that's youtube.com/user/ParaReality1. That's my YouTube channel. Wow, those are all, man, I got a whole bunch of different things that I appreciate everybody who takes the time out of their day to listen to this podcast. I enjoy doing it. It's fun for me, and I get to learn a lot of things, and it's more than just a hobby. However, I'm always trying to grow the podcast and gain new listeners, and one of the ways that can be done is for you guys to like the podcast. And I have always hated this, so I'm not very good at it, but I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this podcast on, whether it's Apple or Spreaker or Google Play or whatever, iHeartRadio, Spotify, whatever it is that you're listening to, whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, please do me a favor and like this podcast, and that helps me grow and gain new listenership. I would really appreciate it. And if you're a member of Podchaser, I am also on Podchaser. Just look for ParaReality on Podchaser. And if you can rate the show on Podchaser, that would be great too. Ratings is how I gain followers, and I really want this podcast to have as many people listening to it as I possibly can. I'm not doing this for money. I'm not asking for your money for this. I'm just asking you, if you're listening to this podcast at the end of it, or even right now, or at the beginning, in the middle, wherever, just take a second and just give me a rating. And I would really appreciate good ratings. I don't want bad. I'd like a 3-star rating or better, please. If you can find that in your heart, I would so greatly appreciate it. The next episode of ParaReality is going to air on August the 6th. At 8 o'clock p.m. Central U.S. time, and I'm going to be winding up my summer series on mysterious noises, so make sure you tune in, and find out what that finale is going to be all about. I hope that this podcast opens up your mind to new ways of thinking, expands your consciousness, and produces a change in the way you see the world. If you wish to change, you must lift the veil of ignorance that has been cast over your eyes. Only then will you see the true power of the universe. I hope you have a wonderful evening, wonderful weekend, and I'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
If you wish to change, you must first lift the veil of ignorance that has been cast over your eyes. Only then will you see the true power of the universe.